So welcome to our cost analysis webinar. And in this webinar, we want to think about three primary questions. How do you track your costs? How do you view and understand that cost data that you've collected? And then how do you make decisions on that cost data? And obviously those are kind of three big questions. So we'll kind of address it from an action flow perspective and kind of we won't deep dive because we can't deep dive on these questions in 30 minutes. But here, let's just start with the basics of business. On one hand, if you charge too little, you're not going to make a profit. But on the other hand, if you charge too much, you won't make sales. And why is that? That's because on one hand, you have costs. So if you charge less than what it costs you, you're not going to make a profit. And on the other hand, you have the competition or the market. And so if you charge too much, you won't get any sales because the competition will have more affordable prices. And then whatever revenue you make beyond your cost, that's your profit. And so we know you all have decisions to make, and you're probably going to be in this sweet spot between your costs and the competition. And so you may decide that you're a value leader. So you may not charge as much to your clients or your customers, and so you'd be considered a value leader. You would get, in theory, you'd get more sales because you offer a better price than your competition. Or you may decide that you're a premium provider, so you're going to charge more, but that's because you're going to charge more, so there'll be people charging cheaper value, but you are offering maybe a higher end product. You might do more custom work, so we would say you're more of a premium provider. And we can't, we're not here to make that decision for you, but we want to give you the information so that you can make that decision as informed as possible. So how do we do that? With Action Flow, we can help provide an exact margin for each job so you can at least know your margins. And then we also want to help cut your costs. And ultimately, that means we want you to be able to increase your revenue, and ultimately increase your profit by pushing your costs down while still making a profit. So by knowing your margin, you are more informed in making the decision about what to charge, essentially. And we have seen this work. This is a quote we have from one of our clients that in the first month of using Action Flow, they saw an increase in revenue. And why is that? It's because they had a clear understanding of what their costs would be. And so they were able to bid lower. So they were able to better understand this relationship between their cost, their profit, and how they fit in this sweet spot. So how do we do this? Yeah, at some basic level, let's start with your sink. So in order to track your costs, you have to know your costs. Something like a sink is easier because that's usually kind of a fixed amount. It may change, but you're paying a specific fixed amount for a sink, and then you're going to charge on that. So if for example, you may buy a sink for $125 and then you're going to charge $250 for that. Once we start getting into material, it gets a little trickier, right? So there's a few different ways you may charge your customers for the job. You may charge based on the square footage of the job, of exactly how many, the square footage of their countertops. Some people say I paid for a slab. A lot of that's going to go to waste, so I'm going to charge for the whole slab. And then there's this kind of hybrid situation. So option one is where you're going to charge the revenue and costs by the slab. Option two is you're charging your customer by the square footage. And then sometimes you may know exactly how much of the slab you've used, and sometimes we have this approximate waste percentage. So let me go into that a little bit more detail. So let's look at option one. So here is our area module. Many of you should be familiar with it, but if you're not, this is how we do quoting. And so in this case, we're if I'm on this left-hand side, you can see we're doing Raha Pink. That's the slab, and we call this charging per slab. So if you go down to the bottom, you can see my slab details. I have the cost, and then we have decided what we want our margin to be on this particular slab. So I'm going to go over here to the left-hand side. So now you can see on my two slabs, we have the cost is the cost of these two slabs, and the revenue is the margin that I've added for each of these slabs. And so we can see the cost and revenue here. Now, option B is, in this case, we're using Golden Fantasy, and that's a square foot unit. So we can also still see that I have my slabs here. But now my revenue is not based on the cost of these slabs. My revenue, if we go to line items, we're going to look at this line. My revenue is based on what I am charging, which is $70 per square foot times the square foot of the job. And my unit cost is $20. And so in this case, what we've done is we have said, you know, we don't know our exact margin, so we're going to add a 30% margin. And so I'm going to go now back into administration. So in this situation, so here is our granite, and here is our 30% upcharge, our 30% margin. And we can see for Golden Fantasy, I know my unit cost, and so we've automatically added a 30% margin. So if I do 1.3 times, so 1.3 is that 30% margin times 16.09, we get 20.917, and that's what we see on this page. So we've added this margin, and obviously you can set this margin. You may not know about this feature, but you can set that to what you think it should be, and it will automatically add in that margin. Now option 3, or option C, this is a little bit unique, but we've had a couple of people who wanted to do it in this way. They want to charge by the square footage. So I'm going to go back to my line items, and we're going to go to Baltic Brown. Up at the very top, we can see that we have our $45 revenue. So again, that's just what we put in the backside in our SKU items. And so it's doing $45 times the square foot of the job. So 49 square feet times $45 per square foot, and you get your revenue. So this is what you're charging your customer. But you may say, I don't want to go off of a 30% generic margin each time. I want to still do costing, do my own cost based on the slab. So what we've actually done in this case is you have your revenue based on square foot, but at this bottom line item, we see we actually have the cost is coming from these two, the actual cost of those two slabs. So there's different ways to account for your cost. So that's we can kind of, if you have specific questions about how you're doing costing, we can obviously go into that a little bit more in depth. But that's kind of an overview of 3 different ways we can charge for material. Once we do that, regardless of how you charge for material, we're going to look at this area summary. So in each case, we're going to have a pre-tax cost, a margin, and then a margin percent. So if you have your cost information, again, we have like here's the sink. Again, I said that's pretty straightforward, right? $75 was the cost, and you're charging $225. And then we have the material here as well, and you can get a margin for each one of your jobs. The last piece is where you'd want to know cost is with labor.
A good starting place for doing costing for labor is with sink cutouts or vanity cutouts, because you normally know the amount of time that it takes to do a certain cutout. So let's say, for a vanity cutout, it takes 20 minutes, and your overhead for a certain machine that is going to do the cutting is $2.50 an hour. So we can do a simple calculation. So we'll say 20 minutes over 60 minutes in an hour. So it's 20 minutes is 0.33 of an hour times 250 an hour. So we know that it costs you approximately $83.3 to do a 20-minute vanity cutout. So I'm going to go into the back end, into the administration and the SKUs, and go to cutout. I'm going to go down to vanity and go to the unit cost and set this to 83.3 and save. And you know, so if we say it costs about 83.3, for now I have a $150 revenue on that cutout. So I'm going to go back into my area, refresh the calc type. I'm going to remove this farm sink, and you know, obviously this looks like a kitchen, so you may not have a vanity in here, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put this vanity in here, and let's see if I calc and save. I think we need to undo now, calc and save. So you can see we have our vanity, and we're charging 83, or the cost, we put the cost in there is 83.3, and the revenue is 150. So if you know you're not doing any costs for any labor, I think a good starting place, and this is recommended, is to go ahead and start with maybe one vanity and one sink, and just do your basic calculations. Keep it pretty simple. If you have an idea of, you know, how much time each one takes and your approximate overhead for your jobs, go ahead and just kind of come up with your initial ballpark value for cost and just play with that for a while. And in a little bit we'll go over reports, and so this was just kind of a good starting point just to see how this costing of labor works in action flow. The next step is to then maybe in terms of labor costing is then to deal with things that are a little bit more complicated, like edging.
With a linear feet, I'm going to go back into my SKU items and go down to, or go up to edge. And we can see here I can charge different costs for my edge. And obviously this is tricky to know, right? How do you determine the unit cost for a linear feet of bullnose? And so, you know, at the core, it's going to be how much you're paying your guys that are working on your saws and your machines. It may be the time it takes them. So this value is obviously a little tricky to nail down. But if you have an idea, then we can add that to our cost to the understanding of our costs. So we can see here we have different labor costings, which again can be a little bit tricky to figure out. But if you know that, then we can help you identify your margin. So let me get back here, tracking your costs. So once we have, so again, that first question is, how do I know my costs? How do I track my costs? And so the short answer is, we can work with you to determine, you know, how do you want to chart or account for costs for materials, but ultimately that cost information goes into the SKU items page. So it's an administrative task where you're telling us what your costs are so we can tell you your margin. Once you have that information, one way we allow you to use that information is with a report called Job Cost Projected. And so we call this projected because you are saying, I think it's going to cost $350 per linear foot to do a bullnose. But we say it's projected because you can't know for sure. Did it actually cost us, you know, $2.85? Did it cost us $4? So that's why we call this the job cost projected. So I'm going to pull up this report, and this is our demo account again. So, you know, this data may not be the most accurate, but here we have the 5 jobs that we quote unquote installed during February. And so this will just break down how much square feet you did, what your pre-tax cost was, what your revenue was, what your margin in dollars was, and so what your margin percent was. So we had a 76% margin. for our demo account. And if I just click the show details button, this can break it down even a little bit more. If you want to know why, for example, I'm seeing all these square feet are the same, and it looks like that's because we did pretty similar jobs for our demo account, which is understandable. But this is one report that can give you key information to help you make the decisions that you need to make about how much to charge.
Grace, this is Roderick.
Hi, Roderick.
Hey,
Would you be willing to go back into the setup, SKU setup? I just want to make one clarification on something you showed.
Okay.
And so scroll to the right, go to Granite, for instance.
Okay, perfect.
Scroll to the right. Okay, what I wanted to just kind of point out is that field that you're pointing to that has 30, that is a waste factor. And you can define a different waste factor for quartz versus granite, you know, and in your porcelain, etc. And there are industry standards that you can get from various organizations and talking to your, you know, doing some network with your friends. But that value, as Grace pointed out, that percentage inflates the material cost. At the moment that you actually allocate the inventory, if you then go to reports and look at actual, then it's going to be the real material costs, not the projected. So just want to point out that this value that's here is only through the estimation process. But once you actually allocate material and then you look at the report that deals with actual costs, then of course that 30% is no longer taken into the equation.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for pointing it out. And you're exactly right. We do have a report called Job Cost Actual, and exactly what he said, that when we run that report, you can look at what slabs you actually used. Now, and so that's helpful. Now, in a perfect world, and we're not there in a perfect world yet, but you know where we're hoping to get to, or perhaps if is that in addition to it being actual in terms of actual slabs, you know, what if your employees could enter what you actually, the time they actually spend on the job? How much time did they actually spend putting the edge? How much time did they actually spend sawing the information? And if they could efficiently enter that information, it would not only be actual in terms of the actual material, but it would be actual in terms of the actual labor that went into that job. So right now, this job cost actual, in terms of material, it's sort of a pseudo actual. It's an actual in terms of the actual material that was used, but it's still just using your labor based on what you projected based on the line items. So yeah, thanks, Roderick.
Well, and the other thing, Reese, is since you've put your TLC into this job cost actual report, we've had a number of real critical scrutinizers look at this, and the numbers tie out. So I'll validate that this report, since you did the update about 6 weeks ago, has really been powerful.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. It's pretty complex. Just gathering the right data, and you do have to use the inventory module and enter your slabs and mark when slabs are being used. So there is some data entry required to make this report valuable. But that's encouraging to hear that it's been scrutinized and deemed accurate. I thought it was, but it's always nice to get that feedback.
So again, there's this kind of key question. One is, what is your margin goal? What do you want your margin to be, and what should it be? And the other key question is, what is your waste goal, and what should it be? And these are questions that are complicated, obviously. And so if anyone has, obviously you don't have to share your specific numbers, but if anybody's had to wrestle with this, you're welcome to either put it in the chat or to share kind of what it looked like to wrestle with what should our waste and what should our margin be.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Just to jump in, we do think we have some pretty nice tools for calculating these numbers, and they're working well, and we have clients that are making use of that. You know, right now, you actually have to give us the numbers, as Grace was saying, and like, you know, what is your cost per linear foot for a beveled edge? That's kind of a tricky question. But if you know that, then we can put it in action flow and calculate it. Going forward, like looking out a year or two, you know, we've got a lot of data from fabricators, and if fabricators give us permission to use that data and run some reports, we think it'd be kind of cool to be able to provide some statistics and guidance over on, you know, what is the typical cost and things like that, and what are some of the industry standards. So we're moving forward and formulating this and figuring out what to do, but we would like to continue to enhance your ability to understand your costs and set your prices and appropriately. And, you know, Grace just mentioned it fairly briefly, but we talk about reducing costs, and we would just say generally through using action flow and automating your processes and doing things, we would hope, you know, on a large scale throughout your company, that using action flow would be able to reduce your costs. So help you identify and set your prices appropriately, and then hopefully also helping you to reduce your costs. Those are kind of big picture goals that we have at Action Flow.
Great, thank you all. That's those are helpful. That's helpful feedback. So, which actually you both mentioned some of these future features. So the idea is, again, we want to be able to provide you with more resources to accurately track your costs and then better understand your costs. So just to kind of a high level ways that we want to help you increase your understanding of your tracking your costs. One piece that we kind of briefly mentioned is this idea of labor tracking, or saying exactly how long it takes your guys to do different edges on different materials, maybe, or on different machines. And so we're hoping to keep working on this new feature called hourly definitions, where instead of giving a kind of a flat cost for your bullnose based on linear feet, we could actually determine kind of a cost per hour. So how long does it take to do a bullnose, and how much do you charge your guys, and approximately how much does it cost to run that machine for a certain amount of time? I don't know, Reese, do you want to kind of describe a little bit more how this would work?
Yeah, so in this hourly track, I mean, big picture, there's sort of two questions. The one question, which this webinar is concentrated on, is how do we set our prices so that we can make a profit and be competitive in the market? And those prices and those profits obviously depend on how much labor it takes to do a job. So this feature, you know, and what we've talked about in our current features just say, well, we're going to estimate that it's, for example, $3.50 per linear foot. But this goes one step further. This new feature that's out there and we're still enhancing, and this says, you know, let's decide, for example, on bullnose, we're going to say, so we have it, this ties into our actions, you know, the whole flow of actions. We're going to say for every linear foot of bullnose, it takes 0.05 hours. So what, I don't know, what's that, 3 or 4 minutes. So we're going to actually define hours per linear foot, both at the edging station and then we, you know, in an example, and we made these numbers up. We have no idea if they're accurate or not, but in terms of putting the edge on and then in terms of finishing, that's going to have some element of charge. So we're actually defining minutes it takes for each of these line items. So every line item, every labor line item, we're going to estimate how many minutes it takes. So then that's going to help us know what our margins are. But the other big thing that these hourly definitions is going to also help us with is clarifying your bottlenecks and optimizing your shop time. That is, so where this will go is based on your line items, Action Flow is going to be able to tell you this job is going to take you an hour of your saw, it's going to take you an hour and a half of CNC, and 45 minutes of finish work. And using that information, then you are going to be able to go to your shop schedule and accurately assign your task each day for each of your stations in the shop. And then if you have bottlenecks, that will identify those, and you should be able then to use these tools to maximize and optimize the flow of your jobs through your shop. So this new feature about hourly definitions is going to help with your profit margins, and it's going to help optimize your shop.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, you can see down here, this is an example of how long this job is supposedly going to take to edge, finish, installs, and template probably isn't accurate, but can you, oh yeah, Raynon just asked if they can set hourly definitions for what type of material is being cut. And
yeah, actually, so go back to administration for a minute. Oh yeah, you're there. Notice like on bullnose, notice there's a material star, which is going to say, if you use the star or the asterisk, that means it's the same for all your materials. But you could say, have the bullnose for Cambria be 0.05 and the bullnose for everything else be 0.75. So yeah, we've got the ability to define that for material. And probably, quartz and granite might be the same. Looks like your connection. But quartz and granite would generally be probably about the same, but I think this might apply in things like Decton or some of those materials that are more difficult to deal with.
Mm-hmm. He said Decton and quartzites.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for the question. And it is a new feature, so we are kind of putting it out there and asking for the first guinea pigs down the hole, so to speak, or some people to start using this, because it is going to take a little effort to test it out and see how it's working. But I do think it's potentially a very, very valuable feature. Oh, and one other thing, we're going to be reviewing prices. So some of these advanced metrics we're talking about, there might be an additional charge for some of those. Not maybe in the range of $50 a month or something like that. It's not going to be a huge increase, but we do think that we're going to review pricing on some of these things once we feel like they're working and ready to go.
Yeah, and we have a few different. There's a few different big features that we're putting together too, so it wouldn't be.
Yeah, there's gonna be a pricing review.
But no one will be required to go up either.
Yeah, right. We're not going to force people to use these new features, but we do. yeah, just kind of glimpses. I think our tier prices might go up like $50, like our basic, and our enterprise might go up a little bit, but we've got this and some other really nice features that we're going to roll out, and we think the features are going to be well worth the price increases. But as you just said, if you're not interested in the new features, you should be able to just stay where you are.
Hanon's typing again. But I'll wait for his question to come through. Another piece, and actually Roderick was very key in kind of getting this piece up and running. And Hanon, I see your question, so feel free to keep typing it out, and we can, when it comes through, we can address it. There's this other piece called $, and I'm happy to do my best to explain it. I don't know if Roderick or Reese, if you all want to.
Well,
do it.
I don't think we'll. This is one of those other features that we'll get. I don't think we'll dive into it in detail right now, but $, is a way. Actually, these two things that I was just talking about, of profit and optimizing your shop. $, is essentially a better way to do those. You know, probably the most common way it's done right now is square footage, where you might schedule, you know, we can do 500 square foot a day. But that's not a great measurement because, you know, a really simple big job might be pretty easy. You just put it through the saw with an eased edge, where another small square footage job might be pretty complex if it has miters and really complex edges. So square footage isn't necessarily a good measure of your profitability on a job, and it's not necessarily a good measure of how much time it's going to take. So $, is intended to be a more accurate measure of your profitability and the time it's going to take. So yeah, and we'll go into that in more detail as we continue to roll that out.
Looks like my internet. Well, let's see. Yeah, I was gonna. Hanon just asked, will the hourly definition show up in the fabrication tab? How long it takes to fabricate each piece? And I can't get to the fabrication tab right now.
Oh wait, go back to that. Oh, you've restarting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one other thing we could show them is on the area module that it does show it per line item.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like you were highlighting the total down in the lower right.
Oh, it can show the hours per line item.
Yeah, so if you go into the line items tab.
Oh, I see.
And then you click on the various line items, it's going to show for each of those line items how much it would take. And I don't think that so that grid there, I don't think, go to the fabrication tab. I know.
I guess we haven't done that quite yet.
I haven't added it here, but I think like probably right below where it says line item summary, we would have that same grid. So you could click on each of those line items and you could see for each line item how long you expect this to take. And in addition, when you are if you are using a fabrication scheduler or using ActionFlow to schedule your shop, on this job, when you added a saw, like for example, in the lower right, you see saw 1.4 hours. So if you were using this feature and you added does
it do it on
saw line item,
no,
it would, yeah, it has to be added as part of the normal process. But it would automatically set that to 1.4. So it would automatically create tasks on your fabrication scheduler that are calculated based on the line items.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Hanan. He said that would be the hourly item summary would be great in the fab tab. So yeah, I think that would definitely be, we would expect to add that.
Yeah.
We're past the 30 minutes, so I'll just briefly run through these. We have other features for understanding cost data. One of them is Power BI. It's a business intelligence software. I'll briefly just pull it up. So for example, this is for, I think, all of our clients. We could show your margin for each year, your cost and revenue. This isn't accurate because this is showing everybody, and I don't think everyone has their cost information in here, but there we might have some other ways to show you and do reporting on your cost data. And then also we touched on this, labor tracking and job cost actual. So the job cost actual report, as Roderick mentioned, right now it's going from that 30% estimated waste, I forget what you call it, the waste percentage, yeah, and it takes you from an estimated waste percentage, and then if you're using the inventory module, it can show you the exact waste for which part of your slab you used. And then we also,
just stop right there because I know we're over, but if you notice on that very first job, there's 2 slabs of Shirebrook, and those slabs are 46 square feet. But we had a remnant of 21 square feet from the first one. So our actual usage was the 46 minus 21. We used 25 plus the full slab. So we used the 71 square feet. And included in that was a 15 square foot of waste. So it's calculating the actual waste based on the actual slabs and the actual remnants that were used on that job.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously the next step would be if you think it'll take your guy an hour and a half to do edge for bullnose, and it actually takes him 2 hours. It would, if your people in your shop are willing to, say I started here and I stopped here an hour and 45 minutes later, an hour and 37 minutes later. In theory, we could have really accurate actual measurements of how long it's actually taking everyone to do specific jobs with specific materials. So that was what we would call labor tracking. So yeah, those are just kind of some future features where we hope to continue to equip you to better make those, to have more information to make those decisions about how much to charge and how to make a profit. So that is the end of kind of this brief, deep, shallow dive into cost analysis, and we're happy if anyone has questions or comments, we can kind of wrap it up.